Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday and welcome on into your FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight. I'm Kaylee Nix and we are here with Mary O'Connell on this Tuesday morning talking all things 3PL. Today, taking a zoom into the pallet space. Mary, thanks for joining us.
Anytime, guys. There's no better place to start your Tuesday or to start your Taco Tuesday. I'm trying to get Check Call synonymous with Taco Tuesday.
There we go. We're getting closer and closer every time that we do an episode or a community update on Check Call on your Tuesday morning. Like I said, we are taking a zoom into the pallet space today, and you've got a lovely guest on from Pallet Trader, which I think is probably an underappreciated part of the whole kind of links that are the supply chain, right? Oftentimes, if you've got goods, they're probably coming to you on a pallet. And if you are out of pallets, then sometimes you're out of luck to move your goods. So talk about why Pallet Trader is so integral into the way that supply chain works.
So it's kind of like the way I see pallets is kind of the way that everyone else sees supply chain, is that you just kind of want it to function. You don't want to have to think about it because, realistically, up until the pandemic, how many people thought about how things were getting to them outside of, obviously the people in transportation and logistics who were moving those items? Like, how many people thought about the trucks and other stuff like that? And that's the same thing kind of with pallets, is that no one really thinks about them until they need them because they're pallets, but they're on just about every single shipment that goes out. And there are restrictions and regulations around them. Like, some shippers will only let you use brand new pallets, and once they're used once, they have to be recycled or moved or shipped to someone else. And others will let you keep using it until you've patched it so many times it looks like a patchwork quilt, and then you gotta slowly work it out to pasture. But pallets are something that everyone has to deal with. And it is kind of a weird topic for the freight broker and 3PL space until they move into that managed transportation and some of those more warehouse aspects of it, because that's when, you're going to have to start looking for pallets yourself. And Pallet Trader obviously helps people source them. But it's something that also the biggest thing in logistics is that if you don't know the answer, or if you can't personally move it or handle it, there's a 99% chance that you know a guy who can get it done for you. So it's really helpful when your shipper comes to you and says, hey, I had a small pallet supplier, they went out of business. What do I do? Do you guys know anyone? And that's kind of where knowing a guy is that value add you can bring to your shippers, as well as obviously your fantastic transportation services.
There you go. It's all about who you know, and it's all about who you can reach out to when your pallet turns into pieces instead of something that can actively support the weight of your freight. Pallet Trader is an interesting space because, as you mentioned, that recycling component of things, which is honestly a place in supply chain that I think doesn't get enough credit, because before a company like Pallet Trader came onto the space, there was a lot of waste when it came to pallets. As you mentioned, some shippers are like, one time, that's it because of structural integrity. But now you have a service that actively works to kind of reduce some of that waste and then also reduce cost. What's kind of the main mechanism that they work through in order to help reduce some of that waste and make sure that these pallets are getting used to their full capability of their lifespan?
Yeah, so they definitely have. Obviously, there's a market for those shippers that are one and done, because those pallets are typically still pretty okay to be used. You can get anywhere from 2 to 10 turns out of a pallet. It just obviously depends on your forklift drivers and different circumstances and stuff like that. But that being said, once you kind of that secondary market for pallets is huge. And so it's really just a matter of, if you're a shipper, if you're a warehouse or a facility that, has a lot of pallets in traffic and you get a lot of secondhand pallets, or maybe you are where that first shipper, they just take all their pallets there because you have a fantastic agreement, that just because a pallet's broken, or just because there's something else, or you have to retire one out to pasture and, break it down to recycle it, you can still reuse those parts. So if you have a pallet that has, maybe 3 boards that are completely fine, but the rest of it got crushed because someone wasn't paying attention in the warehouse, you can take those 3 boards off and save them to repair pallets that break. So it's something that is definitely, just because, one pallet may seem like it's done, it doesn't necessarily that case all the time. So it's really just about being creative, and then also just kind of knowing what you're looking for, and knowing okay, I need XYZ, so I'm going to go find it. And I think that's a really big component to it as well, is kind of knowing what you're looking for. And then that way it's easier to go out and find it. Because you could go out and find brand new pallets all the time. But if that's not what you need, if that's not a regulation that you have to have, then, we love some secondhand pallets. They're great.
Yeah, shopping secondhand is always better than getting that kind of first iteration. And the other thing that I think is interesting to talk about is you mentioned the shipper aspect of it, where the shipper is like, hey, okay, you're using this one and done. But oftentimes, if a problem arises, a shipper will be like, sorry, it's not my problem anymore, right? Like the pallet is in your hands, you're the carrier's hands. I'm not going to deal with it. And then the responsibility is kind of up in the air for who it matters to actually manage that safe and effective movement of the freight. Does Pallet Trader kind of fit into that space as well? Maybe like working hand in hand with either the 3PL or the carrier to say, if this does in fact break and my shipper is like, it's not my problem, it's on your truck, now you can step in and say, okay, we've got this relationship with Pallet Trader, let's get things fixed.
100%. That's one of the really nice things that they have, is that, they're just trying to make everyone happy at the end of the day and make sure that everybody is, happy with the service they're getting, happy with the products that they're getting, and that, no one's really kind of getting screwed over. But that being said, that's why there are insurance agreements and contracts and other stuff like that in place. So that way, in theory, there shouldn't be that much unknown around what happens if something breaks, whose fault is it, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I think it's really just a very fantastic, it's just nice to be able to say, hey, we have these 3PL partners, we have these freight broker partners, we have these shipper partners. And it's really just kind of putting people together that need them. Because there are also some 3PLs that their shippers will say, okay, I received all of this product, I don't need these pallets anymore, will you come pick them up? And so that was even something that I did. I had to, after the busy season for one of my customers, I then had to send probably 10 trucks for 2 weeks, just going and picking up pallets and at different consignees, different locations. And because that was part of the agreement, was that the shipper would come pick up pallets at that place, and then I would take them back to the warehouse, and the warehouse just literally had a pile sitting out in the yard that they were just like, well, we might be able to use these again, but we'll see. And so that's really kind of where, if you have that shipper that says, okay, I need to come pick up, you need to come get all these pallets, part of our agreement to take them, instead of just letting them sit and weather and kind of go bad, more or less, on the warehouse's, yard. It's easier to say, okay, well, here we go. We can give them a second life. We can give them a second home. And it could potentially go from a waste stream to not necessarily a revenue stream, but not losing money.
There you go. You want to at least not lose money on the stuff like that. It's such an interesting topic and such a very niche subset of supply chain that I think people need to pay a little bit more attention to. So we love that you're bringing it to light. For people who want to listen to or watch this episode of Check Call, where can they go to find that, so that way they can get maybe a little bit more informed about their options when it comes to pallets?
Well, if you want to learn everything there is to know about pallets, you can, in the visual style, you can watch the latest episode today on YouTube at 12:30 Eastern. And then if audio is more your vibe, then you can check out the podcast anywhere you get podcasts, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, also at 12:30 Eastern today. And if that's not quite enough news for you, you can subscribe to the newsletter on checkcall.com/freight, or at freightwaves.com/checkcall.
There we go, Mary. Thanks for joining us this morning. We will catch up with you later on.
Bye, guys.